The problem is that there's been a serious failure in the regulatory agencies in Malaysia. The agencies in charge of approving medical schools, in approving the number of seats per medical schools, in approving PTPTN loans for the medical students. You see, in Malaysia now we have 31 medical schools, about 11 of them in the public sector, and 20 of them, 21 of them in the private sector. And of these, 10 were approved after the year 2000. And so now they're coming out with about 5,000 to 6,000 graduates per year. Now the problem is these approvals were done by the regulatory agencies, not the Ministry of Health, and without looking into the issue of how much housemanship training do we require for all these students. And after housemanship, can the government system absorb them so they can do the specialization? So all these things were not taken into consideration, and it's partly affected by the fact that a lot of these new medical schools had senior government servants who, upon retirement, DGs, deputy DGs of various ministries, who helmed these medical schools. And so when they came and asked for permission and they asked for quotas for students, they were approved. So the regulatory agencies failed to regulate, and the Ministry of Health then was faced with too many medical graduates coming out. Now the problem with the MOH faces is that there's a certain number of posts available, and when these posts are filled, you can't just simply hire more people into the same level of service. So what they did was, around 2013, 2014, they started employing these medical graduates as contract officers. Yeah, so that you can do because it's not permanent posts, but it's basically kicking the can down the road. So now, at this point in time, we have, out of the 71,000 doctors in Malaysia, we have 51,000 in government service. Of the 51,000 in government service, 23,000 of them are contract officers. Recently employed in the last few years because there's a lack of permanent posts. And now the first batch of about 2,500 contract officers are reaching their 5-year term. So what does the government do? Can it absorb them into service? But it can't, because the permanent posts are filled. And there will only be a temporary thing. How about this 2,500? How about the remaining of the 23,000? So we are really in a big mess created by the government itself. So it's unfair to ask the doctors, the young doctors, to bear the brunt of this. I mean, they became doctors. They went for medical school. They paid the fees. It's between 300,000 to 800,000 for a course. Now to tell them, sorry, we can't do anything. Go and find your own job. I think that's not fair. So what we are suggesting is we should, for the time being, extend the contract by another 5 years for all these doctors and allow them to participate in the master's program, so they have got time to specialize. So they're not forced out in the private sector without proper training. The second thing is, I think we've got to cut down the intake of medical colleges. Perhaps reduce the intake into public colleges by 10%, but reduce the intake into private colleges by 70%. Those who are already in, I think we cannot ask them to be sacked or whatever. It's not fair, right? You already allow them in. But those new ones from now on, reduce the private colleges by 70%. They've already made their money. They've got the PTPTN loan. They got the loans from the students. They made their money. I think we cannot go on that. We can't go on commercial. So we got to cut down their intake. Maybe they got to amalgamate. The third thing we have to do is we got to increase permanent posts in the government sector, because the government sector is overloaded. We need a new general hospital in most of our major towns, in Ipoh, in Seremban, in Klang. We need new hospitals. We need more doctors at outpatient clinics. Doctors are still seeing 100 and 150 patients per day. How can they do justice to this number of patients? So we need more doctors, but we need to create the posts. That's going to be a longer term thing. And the other thing that we got to look at is the whole issue of taxation in ASEAN. Because in ASEAN, we have this race to the bottom among ASEAN countries where all of us are cutting our tax on corporate sector, cutting our tax on the top income bracket, because we want to look business friendly, Musra business, and we think that will get us more investment, that'll get us more FDI. So, Malaysia had a corporate tax rate of about 40% of profits, in the 80s. We're now down to 24%. And we are pressured by Singapore's 18% and Thailand's 19% to reduce from 24% even lower. But when you reduce corporate taxes, when you reduce taxes on the rich, then you don't have the funds to create more posts, for example, for doctors in the government service. So this is a conundrum that I think we got to address, because it can't be addressed by Malaysia alone. Malaysia alone cannot raise taxes. It's going to be done as a collective. So these are the kind of things that we have to look at now. Thank you.